Chosen one. Nothing about this moment is an accident, and the fact that these words are reaching your eyes right now carries more weight than you realize. Out of all the noise, all the scrolling, all the endless distractions pulling at your attention, you stopped here. You felt something. Maybe you don't even know what it is yet. Maybe it's just a quiet pull in your chest. But it's real, and it's not random. There are seasons in life when everything feels ordinary, repetitive, predictable, and then there are moments that feel arranged, aligned, like invisible threads have been weaving behind the scenes for longer than you knew. If you're here, hearing this, sensing that subtle recognition in your spirit, I need you to stay until the very end. Don't rush this. Don't treat it like background noise. And if, at any point, something inside you stirs, something hopeful, something bold, write your warmest wish in the comments and seal it with Amen. Just once. Let it be intentional. Let it be real. There is something powerful about declaring what your heart has been quietly carrying, about energizing the atmosphere around your own faith. And then breathe. Because this isn't about superstition. It's about alignment. Chosen one, you have underestimated how guided your path has been. You've called things coincidence that were anything but. You've brushed off encounters that were precise. You've minimized nudges that were deliberate. I know how it feels. It's easier to believe life is random. It keeps things simpler. If it's random, then there's no pressure, no responsibility, no meaning attached. But what if meaning has been attached all along? Think about the delays you hated, the doors that closed when you were convinced they were your only chance, the people who walked away right when you thought you needed them most. It felt cruel. It felt confusing. You questioned yourself. You questioned God. You wondered if you were being punished, overlooked, forgotten. But look at you now. You're still here, still standing. Not the same, though. Something has sharpened inside you. Something has matured. That's not random growth. That's intentional shaping. There's a difference between drifting through life and being positioned. Drifting feels passive. Positioning feels uncomfortable. When you're being positioned, things shift under your feet. Relationships recalibrate. Priorities rearrange. You lose interest in what once consumed you. You become quieter in rooms where you used to perform. And people notice. They might not understand it, but they feel it. You're not as accessible as you used to be. Not as reactive. Not as eager to prove yourself. That's because something deeper is happening. If you're seeing this, it's not random. It means you're in a transitional space, a threshold. And thresholds are strange places. You're not who you were, but you're not fully who you're becoming either. It can feel lonely, disorienting. You may look around and feel like no one else quite understands the weight you're carrying, the awareness you're developing, the way you can't unsee certain truths anymore. Awareness changes everything. Once you see your worth clearly, you can't shrink back into old versions of yourself. Once you recognize your calling, even in fragments, you can't pretend you don't feel it. And maybe you've tried. Maybe you attempted to go back to what was comfortable, to conversations that felt shallow, to ambitions that felt safe. But it didn't fit anymore, did it? It felt tight, forced, almost suffocating. That discomfort wasn't failure, it was evidence. Evidence that you're being elevated beyond old environments. Chosen one, there's a reason certain opportunities passed you by. You thought you missed them. You didn't. They weren't designed for the version of you that's emerging. You're not late. You're not behind. You're not overlooked. You are being calibrated for something precise, something that requires the exact timing you've been frustrated by. I know it's hard to trust timing when you're tired, and you have been tired. Tired of waiting, tired of hoping, tired of being the strong one, tired of holding faith when results were slow. You've had nights where you questioned whether your belief was naive, whether you were clinging to something invisible while everyone else moved on with practical certainty. But deep down, you never fully let go. That persistence isn't random either. There's something about you that refuses to die, even when discouraged, even when embarrassed, even when misunderstood. A quiet resilience. You don't always display it loudly. Sometimes it looks like silence. Sometimes it looks like withdrawing. But it's there. And that's why this message found you. Not because you're perfect, not because you have everything figured out, but because you're sensitive to alignment, sensitive to spiritual shifts. You feel when something resonates, and you felt something here. Let's talk about that feeling. It's subtle. It doesn't scream. It hums. A low, steady recognition. Almost like remembering something you forgot you knew. When truth meets readiness, it doesn't need to force itself. It settles. That's what's happening right now. You're not here by accident. Not because an algorithm randomly served this up. Not because you had nothing better to do. There is alignment happening behind the curtain of your normal day. You may not see the full design yet, but you can sense movement. Internal movement. The way your thoughts are evolving. The way your standards are rising. The way your tolerance for mediocrity is shrinking. You're becoming intentional. And intention changes destiny. The people around you might still treat you like who you used to be. That's normal. They're interacting with memory, but you're interacting with becoming. There's a difference. You can feel the stretch inside you, the expansion, the refusal to settle for half-truths or half-efforts. You want more now. Not more noise, not more validation. More depth, more authenticity, more purpose. That hunger isn't random. It's a signal that you're waking up to your own magnitude. And here's the part that's uncomfortable but necessary. Not everyone will come with you. Some people were seasonal. Some conversations were chapters, so not the whole book. It doesn't make them villains. It just means your trajectory shifted. When you rise internally, alignment externally has to adjust. You've already felt that separation starting, haven't you? The quiet distancing, the conversations that don't quite connect like they used to, the sense that you're thinking in layers while others are thinking in surfaces. It can feel isolating, but isolation isn't abandonment. Sometimes it's incubation. Growth often happens in private. You don't sprout in the spotlight. You strengthen in hidden places, in reflection, in uncomfortable honesty, in the moments when no one is applauding you, but you keep choosing integrity anyway. Chosen one, you're in one of those hidden, strengthening phases, and it's preparing you. Preparing your mind to handle greater responsibility. Preparing your heart to carry influence without arrogance. Preparing your spirit to stay grounded when recognition comes, because it will. Not necessarily in the way you imagined years ago, not necessarily with flashing lights and loud announcements, but in undeniable clarity, in doors that open without you forcing them, in connections that feel aligned instead of strained. You won't have to chase what's meant for you at the level you're stepping into. You'll recognize it, and it will recognize you. That's why this isn't random. You're being reminded of who you are before the world tries to redefine you again. You're being anchored in truth before external pressure increases. You're being steadied. Feel that steadiness. It's subtle, but solid. You've survived things you once thought would break you, and now those same experiences are shaping your wisdom. You speak differently because you've seen differently. You trust differently because you've learned differently. You're not naive anymore, but you're not bitter either. That balance is powerful, and it didn't happen by accident. Everything you thought was delay was refinement. Everything you labeled rejection was redirection. Everything that felt like silence was construction happening underground. You were never unseen. Even in the loneliest moments, especially then. If you're seeing this, it's not random. It's confirmation. Not hype, not fantasy. Confirmation. A quiet nod from the unseen layers of your life that you're aligned more than you think you are. You're stepping into awareness. And awareness is the beginning of everything changing. There's something else happening beneath all of this. It's quieter than ambition, deeper than excitement. It's the slow realization that you don't fit where you used to fit. And not in a dramatic way, not in a way that needs to be announced. It's just true. You've been noticing it in small moments. The way certain jokes don't land the same anymore. The way certain conversations feel draining instead of energizing. The way you can sit in a crowded room and still feel like you're observing from a distance, almost like you're standing slightly outside the scene. Not disconnected, just aware. That awareness isn't random. It's elevation without spectacle. Sometimes people think elevation comes with applause, with obvious upgrades, with visible status. But the kind of shift you're in right now, it's internal. It's the rewiring of what you tolerate, the recalibration of what you chase, the quiet refusal to betray yourself just to be accepted. You didn't announce that change. You didn't even plan it. It happened because you got tired of shrinking, and that exhaustion was holy in its own way. There's a version of you that used to bend too much, to adapt too quickly, to compromise too deeply just to keep peace. You'd silence your intuition. You'd doubt your instincts. You'd convince yourself you were overthinking when really you were discerning. Now you don't override that voice as easily. Now when something feels off, you pause. That pause is power. It's subtle, but it's the beginning of authority over your own life. Chosen one, the reason this message found you in this season is because you are transitioning from reacting to leading. And I don't mean leading crowds. I mean leading yourself, leading your emotions instead of being dragged by them, leading your decisions instead of being pressured into them. That shift changes everything. You're starting to realize that not everyone has access to this level of clarity. Some people are still asleep to their own patterns, still looping the same cycles, still blaming the same circumstances. And you were there once too. So there's no arrogance in you about it, just understanding. You see the difference now. You don't crave chaos the way you used to. You don't romanticize instability anymore. You don't confuse intensity with depth. You've tasted peace, even if only in glimpses, and now your spirit recognizes it. And once your spirit recognizes peace, it refuses to settle for constant noise. That's not random growth. That's refinement. Refinement hurts sometimes. It strips away illusions. It exposes where you've been tolerating less than you deserve. It forces you to sit with truths you once avoided. But it also strengthens you in ways you can't always articulate. You've been strengthened quietly. There were nights no one saw, conversations no one heard, prayers no one witnessed, moments when you were on the edge of giving up on something that mattered deeply to you, and somehow you didn't. You might not even know why you didn't, but you didn't, and that's significant, because resilience doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers, just one more day. Sometimes it looks like getting out of bed when you'd rather disappear. Sometimes it looks like choosing integrity when cutting corners would be easier. You chose the harder path more times than you admit. And every time you did, you stepped slightly out of the ordinary flow of people who don't question themselves, who don't grow, who don't reflect. You reflect. You think about your choices. You replay conversations. You ask yourself whether you handled things well. That level of self-examination can be exhausting, but it's also rare. It means you care about alignment, about becoming better, not just appearing better. That distinction matters. There's a reason you feel like you're outgrowing certain spaces. It's not because you think you're superior, it's because your internal standard has risen. And when your standard rises, your environment has to match it, or it starts to feel uncomfortable. You're not meant to force yourself back into comfort zones you've outgrown. That tension you feel? It's the stretch before expansion. And expansion can be lonely at first, not because you're alone, but because you're early. Early in seeing what others haven't seen yet. Early in deciding what you will no longer accept. Early in realizing that your value doesn't decrease just because someone else doesn't recognize it. You used to seek recognition from people who couldn't even recognize themselves. Let that sink in. Of course, they couldn't validate your growth, they weren't growing. Of course, they couldn't understand your shift. They were committed to staying the same. And you're not. That's the difference. Chosen one, if you're seeing this, it's not random. It's because you're stepping into a level of awareness where you no longer need constant reassurance. You're starting to trust your own discernment, to believe your own inner knowing, to stand in your truth without apologizing for it. It's quiet confidence, not loud, not performative, but steady. You don't need to announce your boundaries anymore. You just live them, and people feel it. Some will respect it, some will resist it, some will try to test it. But none of that changes the fact that you've shifted. There's a calmness growing in you. It wasn't always there. You used to react faster, defend yourself quicker, explain yourself more. Now you're selective. You conserve energy. You don't argue with misunderstandings as much. You let people think what they think if it doesn't threaten your integrity. That restraint is maturity. And maturity isn't random, it's earned. Earned through disappointment, through betrayal, through mistakes you had to own, through consequences that forced you to reflect. You didn't skip the lessons, you lived them. And because you lived them, you're different now. More grounded, more observant, less desperate. There's power in no longer being desperate. Desperation makes you chase things that aren't meant for you. It makes you accept crumbs because you're afraid of having nothing. But you've been in the nothing before. You've survived it. And now you know you'd rather have peace alone than chaos with company. That realization sets you apart. Not in a flashy way, in a foundational way. Your foundation is shifting from external approval to internal alignment, from proving yourself to knowing yourself, from competing to becoming. And that's why this isn't random. You're in a season of internal consolidation, gathering your strength, clarifying your identity, releasing old narratives about who you thought you had to be. You don't have to be the savior in every room. You don't have to be the loudest voice. You don't have to be the most impressive person at the table. You just have to be aligned. Aligned with your values, with your purpose, with the quiet conviction that you're being led even when you can't see the full map. There's something powerful about walking forward without needing all the details. Not blindly, not foolishly, but faithfully, with discernment, with patience. You're developing patience, and patience is strength under control. It's easy to act out of frustration. It's harder to wait with composure. It's easy to lash out when misunderstood. It's harder to stay centered and let time reveal truth. You're choosing the harder path more often now. That's growth. You may not feel extraordinary. You may not see dramatic changes yet, but internally, you're evolving at a pace that will soon become visible externally. And when it does, people will call it sudden. It won't be sudden. It will be the result of every quiet decision you made when no one was watching, every boundary you kept, every temptation you resisted, every time you chose dignity over impulse. Nothing about that is random, and neither is this moment. There's another layer to this, one you don't talk about much, the loneliness that comes with seeing differently. Not better, just differently. When your perception shifts, when your awareness sharpens, you start noticing things that once blended into the background. Patterns in people, energy in rooms, motives behind words, and it changes how you move. You can't unsee what you've seen. And sometimes that feels heavy, because awareness isolates before it connects. When you start recognizing truth beneath surface-level interactions, small talk feels smaller. Performative behavior feels louder. You find yourself craving sincerity in a world that often rewards appearance. And that craving can make you feel out of place. But being out of place isn't the same as being misplaced. Chosen one, if you're seeing this, it's not random. It's because you've entered a space where you can't go back to unconscious living. You can't pretend not to notice when something feels misaligned. You can't laugh off disrespect like it's harmless. You can't shrink to make others comfortable with their own insecurities. And that shift has cost you something. Let's be honest about that. Growth costs comfort. It costs familiarity. Sometimes it costs relationships you thought would last forever. There are people who are attached to the older version of you because that version was easier to predict, easier to influence, easier to manage. The evolving version of you, not so much. You're less reactive now, less easily triggered. That doesn't mean you don't feel. You feel deeply, but you don't let every emotion drive the car. You've learned what happens when you do. You've crashed before. You've said things you wish you could take back. You've trusted people you shouldn't have. You've ignored your intuition because you wanted to believe the best. You've been disappointed, and disappointed again. But instead of hardening completely, you adjusted. That adjustment is wisdom. It's not cynicism, it's not coldness, it's discernment. There's a difference. Discernment doesn't assume the worst. It just pays attention. It listens to tone. It watches consistency. It notices when words and actions don't align. And instead of arguing with reality, it accepts it. You're getting better at accepting reality. That's not random maturity. That's earned perspective. There was a time you fought reality. You tried to force outcomes, tried to convince people to see your worth, tried to rescue connections that were clearly dissolving. You poured energy into situations long past their expiration date. Now, you pause, you observe, you let things reveal themselves. That patience is changing your life in ways you don't even fully see yet. You're no longer chasing validation from rooms that don't appreciate your depth. You're no longer explaining yourself endlessly to people committed to misunderstanding you. You're conserving your energy. Energy is sacred, and you're starting to treat it that way. The truth is, Not everyone is meant to understand the level you're stepping into. Some people are comfortable staying where they are. They don't question their patterns. They don't reflect deeply. They don't feel called to evolve, and that's their path. But yours is different. You feel called to more. Not more status, not more applause, more truth, more clarity, more alignment. That calling can feel isolating because it requires solitude at times. Reflection, self-confrontation, honest conversations with yourself that no one else hears. You've had those conversations. You've admitted where you were wrong, where you sabotaged yourself, where fear made you small, where pride made you rigid. You didn't run from those truths forever. You faced them. That's why you're different now. There's a quiet strength forming in you that doesn't need to prove itself. It doesn't need to dominate. It doesn't need to announce. It simply exists, steady, rooted. People can feel that steadiness, even if they can't name it. And some will be drawn to it. Others will be unsettled by it. Because when someone stands in quiet confidence, it highlights insecurity in those who aren't ready to confront their own growth. And that's not your burden to carry anymore. You used to carry other people's discomfort. You used to over-explain just to keep peace. Over-apologize just to smooth tension. Over-give just to avoid conflict. Now you're learning that peace built on self-betrayal isn't peace at all. It's suppression. And you're done suppressing who you are. That doesn't mean you're loud or aggressive. It means you're honest. With yourself first. With others when necessary. You don't twist yourself into shapes that don't fit anymore. That's evolution. Chosen one, if you're seeing this, it's not random. It's because you are in the middle of shedding. Shedding expectations that never belonged to you. Shedding identities you adopted to survive. Shedding the need to be liked by everyone. Shedding is uncomfortable. It feels like loss before it feels like freedom. You might be grieving versions of your life that once felt secure. You might be missing people you know you can't go back to. You might be questioning whether growth is worth the loneliness that sometimes comes with it. That questioning is human. It doesn't mean you're weak, it means you care. But look at the trajectory of your life. Look at how far you've come from who you were a few years ago. The mindset shift alone is proof that something greater is unfolding. You don't react the same. You don't settle the same. You don't dream the same. Your dreams have matured. They're less about proving others wrong and more about fulfilling something internally right. Less about external applause and more about internal peace. That shift is powerful because when your motivation changes, your outcomes change. You're no longer chasing to escape. You're building to align. And alignment creates stability. Stability doesn't mean stagnation. It means rootedness. It means knowing who you are even when circumstances fluctuate, even when opinions shift, even when support is inconsistent. You've learned not to tie your identity to applause. You've learned that silence from others doesn't equal absence of purpose. That lesson alone sets you apart. There are people still waiting for permission to become who they already are. Waiting for approval. Waiting for validation. Waiting for the right time. You're starting to realize the right time is alignment, not approval. And alignment begins within. There's a sacredness to this season you're in. It might not look glamorous, it might not be flashy, but it's foundational. You're strengthening your core, clarifying your boundaries, refining your vision. Vision matters. Without vision, people drift. They absorb whatever environment they're in. They conform. they adapt unconsciously. But with vision, you move intentionally. You choose environments that nurture growth. You detach from spaces that stunt it. You're becoming intentional. And that's why this isn't random. You're being reminded that your path is distinct, that your awareness is a gift, not a burden, that your solitude is preparation, not punishment. There will be a moment, not forced, not rushed, when the internal growth becomes externally visible, when opportunities align with your maturity, when connections resonate with your depth, when your environment reflects the standards you've set internally. And when that happens, it will feel natural, not sudden, not lucky, natural, because you are being shaped for it all along. If you're seeing this, it's not random. It's recognition. Recognition that you're no longer where you used to be, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. Recognition that the shift you've been sensing is real. Recognition that the discomfort was part of the becoming. You're not behind. You're not lost. You're evolving. And evolution is rarely comfortable, but it is always purposeful. And now, this is where it settles. Not with fireworks, not with some dramatic turning point where everything suddenly makes sense, but with a quiet knowing, a steady awareness that something in you has crossed a line you can't uncross. You're not who you were. You can't think the way you used to. You can't pretend you don't feel the shift anymore. Chosen one. If you're seeing this, it's not random. It's a mirror showing you that the version of you who once doubted their own path is fading. The one who needed constant reassurance is softening. The one who thought they were behind everyone else is realizing they were simply on a different road. Different doesn't mean delayed. Different means designed. You spent years comparing your timeline to people who weren't even called to the same destination. You measured your progress against standards that didn't fit your spirit. You questioned your pace because it didn't look like theirs. But your pace was protective. If everything had happened when you first demanded it, you wouldn't have had the depth to hold it. If certain doors had opened before you were internally aligned, you would have walked through them with insecurity instead of confidence, with ego instead of grounding. There's mercy in timing, even when it frustrates you. You've grown roots where you once only wanted wings, and now that your roots are stronger, your rise will be steadier, not frantic, not desperate, not fueled by fear of being left behind, fueled by clarity. Clarity changes how you move. You no longer need to announce your growth. You don't need to convince anyone you're evolving. The evidence is in your peace, in your restraint, in the way you walk away from what once would have trapped you. That's power. Real power doesn't scream. It doesn't posture. It doesn't beg to be seen. It simply stands. And you're standing now in a way you never have before. Look at how you handle things differently. Look at how quickly you recover from setbacks compared to years ago. Look at how you no longer spiral the way you once did. The emotions still come. You're human, but they don't own you. You've learned to observe them without drowning in them. That skill alone separates you from who you used to be. Chosen one, this message wasn't placed in your path to hype you. It wasn't placed here to inflate you. It was placed here to ground you in something you've been slowly discovering on your own. You are evolving beyond environments that once defined you. And that evolution isn't random. It's intentional. You may not see the full design yet. You may not know exactly where the road bends next. But you can feel the difference in your posture, in your tone, in your patience. You're less reactive, less impulsive, less desperate for immediate results. You're thinking long-term now. Long-term peace, long-term alignment, long-term impact. That shift in vision changes the entire trajectory of your life. There was a time when you thought being chosen meant being exempt from struggle. You thought it meant special treatment, smooth paths, obvious favor. Now you understand something deeper. Being chosen often means being refined. It means being stretched in ways that feel unfair, being misunderstood in seasons where you're growing silently, being separated from spaces that feel comfortable but limit your expansion. You've experienced all of that, and you're still here. Not broken, not bitter, just wiser. Wiser in how you trust, wiser in how you commit, wiser in how you detach. You don't cling the way you used to. You don't panic when something shifts unexpectedly. You've seen enough cycles now to understand that endings don't equal failure. They equal transition. Transition can be disorienting, but it's also sacred. Because in transition, identity is clarified, values are tested, foundations are strengthened. You've been strengthened in ways that don't always show on the outside, in ways that don't always get applause, but strengthened nonetheless. And that's why this isn't random. This is alignment meeting readiness. You're ready for a different level of responsibility, a different level of peace, a different level of influence, even if that influence is quiet and intimate, affecting just a handful of lives deeply instead of crowds superficially. Your impact doesn't have to be loud to be powerful. You're beginning to understand that. The noise of comparison is fading. The urgency to prove yourself is dissolving. You're not racing anymore. You're building, deliberately, thoughtfully. And building takes patience. It takes restraint when shortcuts appear tempting. It takes discipline when comfort calls you back. It takes faith when visible evidence is limited. You've been practicing all three, maybe imperfectly, maybe inconsistently at times, but you've been practicing. That effort matters. There's something about you now that feels anchored, even when uncertainty shows up, even when doubt whispers. There's a center you can return to, a grounded place inside that says, keep going. That voice wasn't always that strong. It's stronger now. And as it strengthens, external validation becomes less necessary. You don't need everyone to understand your direction. You don't need unanimous approval. You need alignment. And you're choosing it. Chosen one, if you're seeing this, it's not random. It's a checkpoint, a quiet confirmation that you are not drifting. You are not wandering aimlessly. You are moving, even when the movement feels slow. Slow growth is still growth. Invisible progress is still progress. Internal shifts eventually become external realities. You're in the internal phase right now, and it's building something solid. There will come a time, not forced, not chased, when the external world catches up to the internal work you've done. When opportunities align with your maturity, when relationships align with your standards, when peace aligns with your pace. And when that time comes, you'll recognize it instantly. Not because it will be loud, but because it will feel right. Right in your chest, right in your spirit, right in your timing. Until then, you keep becoming. Not for applause, not for revenge, not to prove anyone wrong, but because you've tasted alignment and you refuse to go back to misalignment. That's the real shift. You're no longer trying to fit where you've outgrown. You're no longer shrinking for comfort. You're no longer doubting every inner nudge. You're trusting more. And trust, Real trust is quiet strength. So take a breath. Let this settle. Nothing about your journey has been random. Not the delays, not the detours, not the isolation, not even the doubts. They were shaping you. And now you're standing in a space where you can finally see that shaping wasn't punishment. It was preparation. If you're here, if you've felt something resonate in these words, let that be enough for now. Not hype, not fantasy, just recognition. You are evolving. You are aligning. You are becoming. And none of that is random.